You are listening to the Marc Guzman Podcast Experience. Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. This episode is brought to you by Benekid Commercial Real Estate. There's more to building wealth in real estate than simply buying and holding. You need to have an entry and exit strategy. You need to know when to invest, have a plan to maximize return during the holding period, and have an exit strategy to sell and exchange the property into a bigger investment. This takes a set of highly qualified professionals to guide you from buying your first investment property to eventually upgrading to the 100-unit complex, providing wealth for you and your family. Brian Benekid and David Peel have over 35 years of combined experience specializing in helping families build wealth through real estate. They assist you in putting your investment on autopilot and will guide you along each exchange. Visit them at www.bcre.co. Again, that's www.bcre.co to give your future a jumpstart. Millennials, walking around as if they rent the place. Perhaps no demographic in the Bay Area has felt the pain of the housing crunch worse than the millennials. With low income, paying off student loans, and having to deal with rising rents, trying to start a life of your own can be incredibly difficult for millennials. Difficult, but not impossible. Our guests today on Highest and Best are Felicia of Abio Properties and Marco Vaticano of the Paragon Real Estate Group. Both are millennials who understand the challenges that those in their age group face trying to make a living here in the Bay Area. And today we'll hope to provide tips and insight to help young renters and buyers to find a way to settle into their own home. Well, welcome to the podcast. We already did a cheers. I feel now that we're officially recording, we need to do just another.
Okay.
Cheers.
Ooh, that one was better because it made the clink sound.
Get the audio. All right.
Did you catch that, Sam? Can you hear it?
Oh, yeah.
So, Felicia, thanks for bringing the mimosas, by the way.
You're welcome.
It was a complete shocker. I mean, you brought literally orange juice, the glasses, and the champagne.
Scott Clico.
I came last time. Yeah, I got the good stuff, too. I came last time, and I remember you guys saying that somebody had brought beer. And I was like, damn it, what a great idea. And then, because we're doing a millennial episode, I figured, what better than mimosas? I was thinking bringing avocado toast, but I'm like, that's just doing
we could have done the kombucha, right?
I actually hate kombucha.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
oh, shoot.
Yeah, I'm kind of a terrible millennial, but I do like mimosas.
I know half of them do.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
I had my very first avocado toast that I actually bought, from a restaurant.
And it was like $10.
It was $10, but it was so delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
It was at Boudin's in Walnut Creek.
Oh, I didn't realize they had it. They're modernizing. Good for them.
They went
through a SWOT analysis, and they are taking advantage of the new market.
So, Marco, thank you for being on the podcast as well. And I'm excited. Now, I actually just recently met you, and now you're on the YPN committee for the Contra Costa Association Realtors.
Yeah.
And Felicia, you're on the YPN. Are you the vice chair?
Yeah, vice chair for Oakland Berkeley Association.
Okay. Great. So we've got some YPNers here.
So next year I'll be the chair. If anybody wants to get involved, hit me up. Looking for a squad to help out. The team is really important. You do the events it's a big job.
Yeah. It is. It takes a village to put this together.
Yeah. And we recently met at the cultural diversity. You were actually on the panel for that.
Oh, cool.
And that was a great event. We had a lot of people show up. I want to say we counted about 80 people that showed up. We had vendors lined up in the room. It was a really good event.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It was actually, we talked about it, and we kind of had a little debriefing at our last meeting, and it was one of the most successful events. I think it's all about putting together something that's valuable, something that people just aren't going to get.
Mm-hmm. Now, Felicia, you've been on my podcast here twice. Is this your third time?
One other time, yeah. No, this is my second time.
Second time, okay.
I think.
This is
I don't know.
Marco's
How many
first
boos were there? Because I might have forgotten the second time. No, this is definitely the second time, yeah.
Yeah. So we got a little bit into your background of how you got into real estate. Marco, I want to talk just briefly. How did you get into real estate? What got you into it?
Yeah, I'm the son of two small business owners, and they always put that sort of vernacular at the dinner table, work for yourself. And it was really powerful seeing two parents who were accomplished and independent. And I had that background in going to college. I had an aha moment. And it really kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I think at the end of the day, I can talk about how cool this industry is and why it's such a great fit for me and my personality. But really, it's about doing a lot of good and being this force and rhyme of reason for the general public. So I realized that my school had a program, San Diego State, and I got involved in commercial real estate about 4 years ago.
Commercial real estate.
Commercial real estate originally.
Very interesting, because many agents that get into the business get into residential,
right,
and then make that transition to commercial.
Right. So the major benefactor for our school was a huge land developer in downtown San Diego, and he put together this incredible program and a series of professors that were just so passionate and dedicated. And I got hooked. I got addicted. I was so interested in diving into commercial, and that really was my platform in the beginning of my career.
So unique, because also I feel like people never actually study this in school. It's usually like a second career for most people, and or they kind of fall into it.
They stumble into it.
Yeah.
So I fell in love with it, and ultimately it's going back to my dad. He's a contractor. He's a stone craftsman. He does a lot of remodeling. And as a kid, I was 5 years old, going to these cool houses and remodeling projects and seeing how powerful it was to make these people happy and leave them with a smile on their face. I remember being a 5-year-old running in, to his clients' houses, and it was powerful, and that's why I'm here.
Now, are you still doing commercial this day?
I'm in residential these days.
So what made you make the switch from commercial to residential?
That's the $10 million question that I always get. Ultimately, commercial is a lot more of an analytical beast. It's working with a lot of landlords and tenants, which I had a lot of respect for, and I closed some incredible deals, and I met some amazing people who I'm still in touch with in San Diego. But ultimately, for me, I think my best strong suit was to work with people on a more emotional standpoint, and I found a little bit more of a compelling reason to work with people who were starting their families and new careers and, emerging and growing. I thought that was a little bit more compelling for me.
Very neat. Felicia, so how's your career been since the last time you were on the podcast?
It's been amazing. So I think when I came here, I was only a few months into the biz.
Yeah.
So I just hit my year mark recently, and it's been a whirlwind. I feel like I've had a successful first year, so I guess that's all that matters. And I'm just excited to continue and take everything that I learned this past year. When did you get into residential? Was that recent?
That was in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay! Congrats. That's awesome.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
It was a huge culture shock. There's just so many different things.
It's so different. I don't even pretend to know anything about commercial real estate. Nobody out there, ask me questions about it, please, because I don't know anything. They're completely different.
You cannot do both, for the record.
No.
I know. I've met some agents who do both. There is no way.
Well, you can't do both well.
Right. Yeah, you can do both. You can do anything in this world.
Yeah. You just won't do it well.
Yeah, so my business partners here at the new company, they're commercial brokers. And it's funny to see their frustration when they're trying to sell commercial properties, but the property is listed by someone who doesn't do commercial properties.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
And it's frustrating because there's no financials, there's no data, it's just a mess. And it actually does a disservice for the property owner. That's a whole nother conversation right there.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that after, for sure.
Hire people who know what they're doing,
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we want to talk about, since we're all here millennials, is what are the challenges that some of the millennials are facing today here in the Bay Area in real estate? So, Marcos, let's start with you. What's been the biggest number one challenge that you've seen millennials face?
Affordability. I think that is the predominant driver in the Bay Area in particular. And, it's not so much a function of lack of inventory. I think people need to set their expectations when they buy their first home or their second home. And for the majority of people, they need to understand the markets that they're looking to buy in.
So affordability, explain that a little bit more. So we hear all the time the reason why it's not affordable is because of lack of inventory.
Mm-hmm.
And so millennials facing the toughness of being able to afford, are you saying that they should look at different areas where they can afford or maybe budget differently?
Yeah, you know what? I think the latter. So I'm working with millennial today, first-time home buyer. We're actually touring property right after this. And it's exciting. She was at the cusp of buying her first house, and she wanted a house. And in Concord, the market to purchase a home is about $450,000 to $500,000 to break that ceiling. And at the same point, it's tough when you're competing with multiple offers, because that's something else millennials are going to face, and how that affects their offer scenario and the driver for, the final closing price. So the biggest thing that's affecting millennials is a competitive market, a lack of inventory, a very fast-paced market, and ultimately so many options out there that they need to distill down to what makes sense for them.
How long are you seeing properties sit on the market for?
7 days.
7 days.
I'm in Walnut Creek. It
It's a hot market.
It is a hot market. And, I'd probably say the same for Felicia. She's probably seen even more, with Oakland being the single biggest market in the Bay that had the most appreciation the last 7 years.
I mean, a lot of the top agents in Oakland specifically are pretty strict on keeping it on the market for 2 weeks. So they have a little bit of the control on that front. Setting a specific offer date is huge, and I think that we need to stick with that. I mean, you can always ask to submit an offer early, but most sellers and most listing agents won't accept that. And I think that that's fair, and that even 2 weeks seems really quickly for somebody to get their stuff together and be able to turn in an offer on that offer date. So I think the factors that we can control, we need to as a group, so that it doesn't get too out of hand with, places staying on the market for 1 or 2 days. It's not enough time for people to get ready.
Yeah. What's the average days on market right now that you're seeing?
I think it's 11.
11? She's correct. That's on my website.
Is it?
It is 11 days.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I think it's 11. I don't know, though.
For the entire Bay Area, or are we talking just Oakland? And then Walnut Creek?
I scoured East Bay, so Contra Costa.
East Bay, yeah.
Okay.
But
So
I'd say that's a
11
fair
days on the
assessment.
market.
Throughout
I
the
think
Bay, I'd
so.
say that's a fair
I
assessment.
think so.
I'd say between 7 and 14 days. There's some anomalies that sell off market, and then there's some that go through multiple price corrections.
Yeah.
But if everything's priced right, in the right condition, it's going to sell.
Okay.
Meaning
So
contract.
high rents right now. So for people that are renting, that are wanting to buy, obviously that affects how much they can save, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways they can budget for, saving a down payment?
Spending as less as you can on a place. Like, I know that I think a big thing with millennials are, I've seen it with home buyers and with renters. I think people are a lot more flexible at that age. They're willing to have a roommate. They're willing to live in unconventional spaces. And I think that's huge. Being flexible while you're young and you can will help you save up for your future.
Yeah, I think that having a low monthly cost of living is really important. And, I know a lot of millennials have different situations. Some have great, high-paying jobs because we're in the Bay Area and we're afforded that opportunity to be in one of the strongest job markets in the world, in tech being the biggest driver for that. And what I would say is a caveat for a lot of millennials is, be wary on spending too much of that income. On rent, and 2 on going out to the club,
And 3 on avocado toast.
and
Yeah.
one avocado toast per
You can make your
week.
own avocado toast at home
Right.
for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah,
It's not the same, though.
Yeah,
It's-
add
yeah.
some lemon to it, maybe
Yeah.
some spices, switch it up a little
Poached
bit.
egg.
Invite your friends over so they don't have to go out to eat. I think millennials are also huge on building communities, and I feel like pretty proud about that. I think that friends of mine are pretty creative at finding ways to hang out without spending too much money. In Oakland, we have Lake Merritt, plenty of places to go on bike rides. BART is right there, ferry. There's just so much to do here to where you don't have to be spending as much money, but there are a lot of temptations, and especially with young people having so much money, if they have like tech jobs and they have like a ton of money and it's something new and exciting and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to like treat everybody and treat yourself. Like we keep hearing that. Slow down. How about treat your future self and like save up some of that money that you're earning now so that you can live comfortably later.
I like that. Treat your future self.
Yeah, I just thought of that right
I
now.
love
That's
that.
pretty good.
Ooh, yeah.
Don't steal
Trademark
it.
that. Yeah, no, I'm
Trademarking it.
going to use that. But you know what, Mark, something else I realized is monitoring your credit as soon as possible is incredibly
Preach.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And you could do that for fairly inexpensive.
Credit Karma.
Yeah, Credit Karma. Experian also has a great program for credit monitoring. And yeah, I tell people to go online, get their free credit report every single year.
Yeah.
And just, if anything, you should get it once a year.
Yeah.
But tracking it on a monthly basis.
Yeah. Another thing that millennials can do who are looking to buy in the future, sit down with a lender now and kind of go over your financials, get a financial advisor. Talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, because you probably don't know what you're doing. And if you have a ton of income coming in and you don't know how to save it, or you don't know how to invest it, you need to be speaking to somebody who does.
So speaking of credit, are you aware of what just recently happened with the 3 credit agencies? And
I know about Equifax last year.
Okay, so
and my name popped up in one of the breaches.
Wow. So the
surely both of you too.
So remember how the 31 or 32 attorney generals got together to sue the Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, right? They ended up coming to some kind of settlement agreement. The settlement agreement requires that for someone to file some kind of judgment or lien, which includes like tax liens, and this is something I have to now talk to landlords about, is even judgments on evictions. There has to be a name, there has to be an address, there has to be a date of birth and social security number. Most of the liens and judgments that are filed is missing 1, 2, or 3 of those items. And so there's a lot of, and I see it on management side, I see a lot of screening reports, and we're constantly telling people, hey, well, this came up, can you explain this? And they're like, that's not mine. We do further research and find out it's not theirs, right? So part of the settlement now requires that for a judgment in a tax lien or any other type of lien to have all 4 of those. Well, they've been going through millions of credit reports and discovering that they're having to remove all this off. So I believe as of today, they've removed 50 or 60% of all judgments and tax liens on credit reports.
Ooh.
And they're still working on the remainders. So there's a lot of people that had judgments and tax liens that's wiped out now. They don't. It's not on their report. Not only that is if you file a judgment against someone, even with that correct information, you are now required to manually refresh it every 90 days. Otherwise, it drops off.
As a property manager,
anything.
If
let's say you don't pay, let's say you have
goodness.
an IRS tax lien.
Are people going to do that?
IRS then has to refile every 90 days. Every 90 days. They have to refile to keep that on your report. Otherwise, it drops off.
Wow.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of people in the last probably 2 months, because they, as of April 16th was when they were supposed to begin removing stuff off credit reports. A lot of people have had their credit scores jump small percentage points, or in some cases,
oh, that's why
50,
my credit score
points.
is so much better. No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, that's something interesting that you really haven't heard in the news, but that's what's happening right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy that we haven't heard of that.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to be monitored and updated every 90 days. I mean, that's a challenge to get people's info.
So that's one of the biggest problems, because one of the main deterrents of not getting evicted is because it goes on your credit report. Well, now if the landlord's not going to be
which they probably won't.
Exactly.
So
every 90 days, it's not a big deal anymore. Now, I'm sure there's some kind of other database that will pop up that will be able to pull this, and then you'll have another report that you can do, like an eviction report, right? But on a credit report, it won't show up. So,
yeah, I remember when we were screening tenants when I was representing landlords, and we were working in an office building, for example. You know, the process is a little bit different than residential in that we do the screening. So we'll pull out background check, we'll pull their work info, where they live, and a credit report. And we'll take all of those into consideration to make sure there's no derogatory remarks and they're low risk, essentially.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
You would never do that in residential.
No.
I'm not like, show me your credit report. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, if anything, proof of funds and, let's talk about your lending situation and, your monies. But, as it relates to leasing, at least, it was a very strict guideline that we had to follow.
Yeah. And now it's going to be a little bit tougher because you're going to be running credit reports. Now, this is why you should always still do an eviction background check, because they can at least pull judgments that have been filed,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll still show up on that type of report. But on a credit report, the judgments won't show up unless it's being manually refreshed every 90 days. So that's something very interesting to watch. But now they can go out and get a home loan, or they can
Yeah, because they're not going to look at that.
get credit cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's get more people to buy then, in that case.
Now, working with millennials, do you see a lot of issues with tuition, college tuition, student
that's a good
loans?
question.
Do you see issues? Have you had problems with lending, or maybe millennials can't qualify for a loan because they're not paying that student loan?
I haven't personally seen any of the. I've worked with a lot of millennials, and I think by the time that they're ready to buy, they've already gotten their student loans kind of in check. They're definitely not paid off, but they have them set to a monthly payment that they've been making for a long time. And I think millennials are kind of just like, that's a goal that I'm going to eventually accomplish by paying off my student loans. So I think that they already have that in check by the time they're ready to buy a house. And if you don't, please get it in check or talk to somebody who can give you advice on that, because that should definitely happen before you go in for a bigger loan, like a home loan.
Yeah, I would agree. The client that I'm working with right now, she has a auto loan and a amount of student debt that she still has, which is almost completed as far as her payments are concerned. She was told she could refinance her auto loan, for example, while she was pulling a home loan, because that wasn't going to disqualify her or knock down her credit, because there are two different types of credit. And then at the same time, because her student debt was just nearing its completion, the lender took that into consideration. So I think that as it relates to obtaining financing, you should have someone who can work creative strategies within, legal guideline, of course, but also take a look at who this person is, all things considered, not just their income and some of their assets.
Yeah. Now, one question that we've kind of sourced out, and it's a common question that I'm sure you guys even get. When someone's in the market, they want to buy a house, and they say, where can I find the best housing deals?
That's such an open-ended question.
It's a very common
People
question.
say that all the
A
time.
loaded gun.
Yeah, and I'm like, if only I knew all the answers. Where can they find like a deal?
A deal.
Yeah.
Everyone wants a deal.
Yeah. So, especially millennials, I feel like every millennial that I've worked with has said, I don't care if it's like falling to pieces. I'll do all the work, and they're willing to put in the time and the money and the effort. So go for those little ugly ducklings that nobody else is looking at. Don't be fooled by staging. Staging tricks buyers all the time into spending more money. That's the point of staging. So if you're really looking for a deal, look for the ones with the ugly photographs that are too dark, that you really don't feel like even going to look at, but it might be in the neighborhood that you want. Just don't get fooled by marketing. Look for the ugly ducklings. Put in some sweat equity into your place. If this is going to be the home that you're owning, take pride and ownership in that, and do some of the work yourself. And I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with Felicia on that.
Yeah.
I think that you can't ask for too much at the age range between 21 and 37. You can quote me that in today's market. It's the definition of millennial.
Is it?
I looked it up.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few different marketing associations
Wow.
who will kind of, pick at me maybe within a few years margin.
But is it a birth birth year range,
Yeah,
right?
so for
right
20
now they're 21 to 37.
Correct. In 2018,
Okay.
21 to 37.
I fall
so we
into that category.
We fall in that spectrum.
Okay, I don't
Yeah.
want to assume your age,
Yeah.
but
So we fall in that spectrum. You know what? Leave a buffer. If you're going to buy any home, don't get too attached
oh my gosh,
to
thank
maxing
you.
and stretching out that purchase price. It is a hard thing to realize once you've closed escrow and you're pretty tight on your monthly income now with this mortgage.
I think millennials are pretty good at that because they know the lifestyle they want and they're not willing to budge on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's like a statistic like 85% of millennials would give up the home features that they want in a home in order to be in a neighborhood that they like, which shows that they're just willing to be, they really want to be closer to restaurants, bars, friends. Walkability is important to them, and they're willing to live in a smaller or uglier space
I see
if
that
it
in
means,
rentals.
it's the same for rentals.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
that in rentals. People are wanting to live by shops, restaurants,
Mhm.
public transportation, because a lot of people are coming in and saying, hey, I can save a little bit of money by not having a car payment. That's $200-$400 right there I can save. And if I put that toward, a place where I'm closer to everything that I want to be close at, it's a great deal, right? Well, one thing I also tell people too is when you're buying your first property, you don't have to buy a single family house or a condo or a townhouse as your first property, because most people are going to move out of their first property for whatever reason. Job relocation, your family grows, maybe your family downsizes, whatever the case is. You're most likely 90% of the time not going to be in that one house forever. So look at buying a duplex or a triplex or fourplex, because not only are you're still going through the same type of 1 to 4 unit residential qualifications, but if you're able to live in, let's say, 1 unit and there's 4 units total on the property, you have
income
3
potential.
other you have 3 other rent sources coming in that will most likely offset your own housing expense.
And then by the time you're ready to move out of there and get to a bigger spot, you can just rent out the unit you were living in, and you're already used to being a landlord, or you have a project management company that you already work with, property management company or whatever. So
correct. Yeah. And you also get the exemption of selling because it's a personal residence, and if you live there 2 out of 5 years,
you get that homeowner's exemption.
Exactly. And so now you could potentially sell that, go into maybe a bigger complex. You can still move into the property yourself, but there's different ways to do it. And then eventually one day you could buy your dream house because you've put in the time to live in apartments that you've owned until you have enough equity and cash flow where it's very easy for you to buy your dream home, and it's not going to affect you so much financially. I think that's really the way to go for most people.
Be realistic in your goals. Don't stretch yourself too thin, and leave enough of a buffer for you to have funds left over. Because you know what? The one thing that we don't realize is that when we're renting, the landlord's going to cover a lot of the wear and tear of a house, less part of your security deposit if you put your head through a wall, which is what a roommate of mine had done in college several times. That was funny.
Good times, right?
Good times. But, the second you walk in that house and you make that first mortgage payment and, your toilet blows up or your roof leaks, you're going to need to have some sort of fallback. Yeah, it is on you. There is no landlord who's going to, fix that. And being realistic and setting a realistic budget is important. Because lenders want to do a deal with you, too. And they will get creative as far as stretching you as thin as you want to go. Yeah. Some up to 100% financing, which is scary, and I would not do something like that if it didn't make sense. But, keeping a low monthly cost, if there's one thing that any millennial can take away from this podcast is being realistic and keeping a low monthly cost.
Yeah. Now, have either of you kept up with Costa-Hawkins? We're going to have a big battle
I heard about
November.
That with the rent control in Oakland.
So, Costa-Hawkins was enacted 1996, and this was it 1996? Pretty sure 1996. Yeah. And what it does is it exempts single-family homes, condos, townhomes from being under rent control. And so now that's going to be on the statewide ballot because it's a repeal act. So if that gets completely removed, now every city with rent control
is coming to
market place could pass a simple amendment to their ordinance to include single-family condos, townhomes. Now, in addition to that, Costa-Hawkins also has vacancy decontrol. So if a rent control unit goes vacant, you can then take that unit up to market. So let's say you're renting for $1,000 a month, but the market's $2,000 a month. Well, as soon as that $1,000 a month tenant leaves, then you can market it at $2,000. Well, that would also get repealed, and so a city could come into place and say, you cannot take this up to market. You'll be able to maybe remarket it at the base rent plus an extra whatever the CPI is.
You can do it by this amount, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So then you have an apartment that might go vacant, but you might only be able to raise it by 2, 3, or 4%. and then you have to remarket it at that price.
It's a small solution for the housing and affordability crisis. Yeah. And you know what? The simple fact is that in many metropolitan communities, developers get a credit if they build affordable units. But however, they don't have to build them. They can pay a fee to the city and thwart that to the city to then hire a contractor and a developer to build themselves, which we know working with a city takes forever. So we're constantly playing catch up. And I think that the reason why this is probably on the docket is to solve California's affordability crisis.
Yeah, it's already hard enough for developers to build here. That's why we have a shortage issue. And imposing these strict rules on landlords, it's only going to piss off the developers, and they're not going to want to build here, and they're going to go elsewhere. And we're already seeing it. Investors who used to invest here, developers who built buildings here, they're moving to other cities, they're moving to other states. Why would they want to build here if we're going to impose all of these strict rules on them? And it takes forever to get anything done with the city. So, imposing all these rules is just going to make that harder for them. And our supply is going to go down, which means demand is going to go up, which means prices are still going to go up, which is exactly what we want to avoid with rent. And I know it's hard because I'm a renter in Oakland. I've moved like every year, and so I haven't experienced the joys of being in a rent control unit because I move too often. But so I understand you get big shiny eyes when you hear about rent control, and you're like, oh, that sounds amazing. But it's such a short-term solution to this huge issue that we have, which is just we don't have enough units for everybody here. We need to be building more, but developers just can't find a reason to do that. There's just not enough profit here.
Yeah, and if you look at the cities with rent control, I mean, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, that passed it ages ago. I mean, we're talking about 30 plus years ago when they passed it. Yet here we are. Those are the three cities with the highest rents. And that really comes down to the fact that it really constricts supply. The more regulations and restrictions you have, then unfortunately less number of units, because a lot of people are incentivized into staying at the actual unit instead of moving because they have a pretty good deal.
These renters are locked in. They're not looking to buy. They're not looking to build their own equity. They're stuck in their units. And then oftentimes owners aren't fixing the units because they're trying to push these people out, and so they're having poor management there, which isn't fair to anyone. And then you have these situations where you have a master tenant who has been there forever, and they're getting roommates, which is probably against their lease, and they're charging them up the butt these crazy rent prices to make up so that they can make money on it.
And I totally also I get like the whole argument for rent control. Some prices are really expensive. I rented out my first apartment in Pinole, 2-bedroom, like a 900 square foot apartment for $800 a month. And now that apartment's probably $2,200 bucks. So it's a huge difference over a matter of 12 years. So, I mean, that's a huge bump, right? But one of the arguments is that what's happening is rent control goes to really benefit a lot of people that really don't need rent control.
It's not specific to low-income families.
Correct.
It's not like, oh, we're going to save the rent control for these. No, it's not like that. So there are plenty of people who are in rent-controlled units and homes who don't necessarily need to be there, and a low-income family could be in there, and they're just stacking their money, when they could totally afford market rent.
So Chris Thornburg, he owns Beacon Economics out of San Diego, he was up here recently doing a talk for Mechanics Bank regarding the East Bay real estate and the economy. One of the biggest arguments for rent control is that your income here hasn't really been going up the last 20 years. So if income is not rising for the last 20 years, yet you have this massive appreciation in home prices and rental prices, well, that's an argument to restrict it through rent control. But here's the problem. A lot of those studies and people arguing that income hasn't gone up every year is based on AGI. So that's basically your adjusted gross income. But if you look at the disposable income chart, which is really like how much money does a household really have to spend on anything, which includes housing, cars, anything. Income's been going up, and the average income or household income right now, based on disposable income in the Bay Area, is $110,000.
I'm like, what are you gonna say?
Yeah, it's $110,000.
In San Francisco, that's below the poverty line for a family of four.
In San Francisco, this is East Bay.
Yeah.
So if you're arguing rent control, but then you're having more and more people moving in that don't need rent control, now you're just messing with the market.
Distorted.
It's distorted.
There should be a requirement. There should be an income cap, just as there is.
Yeah, we need something. We just don't need this.
Yeah.
What we're doing.
So you could do an income cap, or one thing that I've also talked to a few people about is every 5 years readjust it. So if you have rent control and you only increase it by 2, 3, 4% every year based on the CPI, every 5 years, whatever the current rent is and market rent, allow the 50% mark difference to be raised, right? So if you're at $1,500 and it's $2,200, $700 difference, so $350, half of that is what the allowable rent increase would be for that 1 year every 5 years.
Gotcha.
You know, something like that. I mean, there's got to be a meaning in the middle. Obviously, rents are really high, but at the same time, you're having more and more people moving into the Bay Area that can afford these prices.
Yeah, and part of that's foreign wealth. You know, we've seen quite an influx in Chinese money coming to San Francisco and also the East Bay.
You're right on that, because the majority of the people moving into the Bay Area right now are foreigners, and the majority of the people moving out of the Bay Area are domestic.
The best, okay, you know what's really funny is when people ask at a listing presentation, well, if I were to sell my house, where would I go? That's a great question.
Yeah,
where would you go? Where would you take your net of $1 million, let's say, after they pay commission and any sort of disposal fees and capital gains taxes? So they're netting $1 million. Well, where the heck are they going to go? They can move to Central California. They can move up north by Eureka or Ukiah or Redding. And they can downsize significantly. Otherwise, they'll move out of state.
Moving out of state, yeah.
So, you know, the cost of living in the Bay Area is what it is. Ultimately, I feel that the median income doesn't support the median mortgage payment. And, in fact, you can't qualify for many of the median home prices in San Francisco Bay with the median income, if that's what you're kind of using. But then, once again, it's about recalibrating your search and finding something that works.
Have you guys been to Seattle recently?
Oh yeah, in January.
Isn't it crazy how much they're developing there? Like you
Yeah,
go
all
and there's like
high-rises.
In Seattle?
Yeah, they're building so many units there.
It's skyscraper city.
Skyscraper central. Like it's ridiculous. Like every block has like a huge crane, like building these giant.
And they decorate them at night.
And
they're like lit up. Did
they
you
look
notice
really
that?
nice.
Yeah,
Is
they're
there
nice
a lot
cranes.
of demand in Seattle for that type of housing, though?
Oh gosh.
Oh yeah.
I guess so.
People
I
are
don't know the
leaving here to
market.
go to Seattle and Portland, and that's what's happening. It's just too crazy here, so people are going to Seattle from here. And they don't have rent control there, and that's why those developers are there building these huge units. And that's, I don't want to be like, yeah, we need to be skyscraper central too, but we need more units, and we all know that, and the supply here sucks. So
Yeah, the other problem is the cities, and Marco, you mentioned this earlier, is the city will stop a development even though it complies with their actual zoning and their current laws.
There's so many hoops that they have to jump through in order to complete a
But
project.
see, now there's
and
that
nobody's
new
willing
law.
to fund that.
Now there's that new state law that kicked in January of this year that states if a developer wants to build and they meet city code, city cannot stop them. And if the city stops them, they're in violation, and it's some crazy, it's like $100,000 fine or per day fine, something ridiculous out there. Well, Cupertino stopped the developer. Developer said, I'm within your codes and your zoning.
Yeah, show me what the issue is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they said, no, you can't develop. So I think he was the first developer to enact that new law this year. And now he's suing the city of Cupertino for not letting them build.
We live in a litigious world right now.
Right?
That was a quote from my former broker
Ooh,
in San Diego.
that's
we
a
live
good one.
we live in a litigious society, so doing everything you can
You've
to
got some good words going
not
on.
over. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
Litigious, word of the day. Yeah.
So for new agents coming in, that are younger millennial agents.
Yeah.
How can they break into the business? What can they do to get involved with the community to source business and also be a part of the change that we're always preaching we want?
First of all, if any of you guys listening are new agents, welcome. It might seem hard at first because you might be young and new and inexperienced and you don't know where to start. Find somebody that you connect with who's been in the business for a while. Reach out to them. A lot of people are willing to help, and that's what I experienced coming in and being new. I just found people to chat with, talk business with, grab coffee with, follow in their footsteps, take certain things from certain people and implement it in your own business, but also find your unique brand and figure out your style of doing business. The connections you make with other realtors are huge in this business. You're not going to go far if you're a jerk, if you're not open to change, if you're not open to learning from more experienced people. Yeah. I'm sure you've experienced that even just coming from commercial to residential. There's a lot that you need there's a lot of personalities. Yeah. And you will find your people, and there's enough business here for everyone. So I don't feel super competitive and like a jerk about it. I'm yeah, let's do this. Let's do a deal together. Shadow me. I don't care. Whatever it takes for people to learn how to, because essentially what's going to happen is these new agents coming in are going to be the ones submitting offers to top agents. And these top agents need to open their doors and their hearts to these newer agents so that they're not submitting crappy offers. If you don't want to do a deal with an inexperienced agent, then how about you help them become more experienced? And I think, we're both involved in YPN, which is the Young Professionals Network. Our doors are open. Come and hang out with us. It's basically a way for newer, inexperienced agents to connect with more experienced agents. And networking is huge in our business. So come out to our events. We do monthly events. I think next year you guys will definitely be doing monthly events too. And we're going to do some together in our different associations. But there's also a lot of other committees besides the Young Professionals Network that you can be a part of. And no matter what your passion is, if you're really passionate about green building or something, go find your people who are into that. And there's probably a committee in your local association for that.
I couldn't agree more. Go find your thing.
Thanks, yeah.
Go find your thing. Go intersect with the people that you are most genuine with.
Yeah. There's enough business for everyone.
It is. And it goes the same for clients too. I'm young, so it seems nobody's going to want to work with me because I'm so young and inexperienced. But no, actually, a lot of millennials are buying homes right now, and they want to work with somebody who gets them and connects with them. And there's that, but for every type of person. You might be a hippie. There's a hippie agent out there for you. You might be a golfer. You might be whatever. And there's somebody out there who does the same things as you do. So go and find them and connect with them.
Yeah, average home buyer right now is 32 or 33 years old.
Yeah.
That's right there in the higher end of the millennials.
Yeah.
Right.
Upwards of 37.
Yeah.
Take that away.
Is it really? That is very surprising to me.
Yeah.
Okay, because I would never look at a 37-year-old and be millennial. I don't know.
And, for the most part, they cringe when I bring that up.
Those
I told that to my last boss, who's
I'm sorry,
a 36-year-old. Oh, you're a millennial too. No, I'm not. You are. You just don't know it. Yeah, you know how to text and you know how to post on social media. That qualifies you. But if there's any major piece of advice that someone can take away just getting into the business, you have to connect with a mentor. You have to connect with someone who is crushing it, who is killing it in their game. And the reason why is because this industry, it takes a village, and they did not learn all on their own or from a textbook or from reading up late at night Facebook articles. They got connected with the right people. And, what I always tell people is, give yourself a chance. Don't become inundated and freak out and worried that you're fresh to the scene. I remember what that was like in college. Networking, everyone in their 20s was like, what the hell is that? I don't want to go into a room full of 60-year-olds and feel like I'm some schmuck. But, you have to give yourself a chance. You have to show up. That's one of the biggest pieces of advice I got early in my career. You have to show up. How do you present yourself to the world? How do you market yourself, your brand? And I think that you really just have to be passionate. Mm-hmm. That is why I'm here. Yeah. I absolutely love what I do, and there's nothing else in the world that I'd rather be doing. And every day is different, and some days are incredibly challenging, and you're up late at night, and weekends are different. They were different in commercial. We had weekends. But I love what I do, and no matter what you do in life, you have to have that for you to live a full and balanced life, and that's what I think is most important.
And that goes for everything. Like even with your marketing strategy, like people are always like, okay, you need to go door knocking, you need to send out flyers, you need to, work your farm, work your spear, do social media. Like you cannot be amazing and an expert at 10 different ways to market yourself. Yeah. Like that's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Pick the thing that you like to do or that you're successful at and that's actually bringing you business, and stick with that for a while and see the outcome of it. Like for me, like I'm not gonna do mailers. Like it's just Same. It's a lot of money that I don't have, and it's just I don't have the time for it. And so I love social media. That's what I do. That's where I'm gonna focus my marketing, and that's it. Like I'm just gonna focus on that for a little while and like ride it out and do something that I like doing. And then for the agents out there who don't like social media, please don't feel pressure to do it. Like you don't have to do that.
That's another
Work your sphere.
Sage piece of advice.
People are like, yeah, I think bad social media is worse than no social media.
You can tell. Like, we can totally tell. You can tell when something's so contrived.
Yeah,
it's trying
like
to
you're
be something.
trying really hard right now. It's just
when you're taking other people's pictures to post.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake of doing that one time, and I realized
no.
I'm like, well, I got inspired. I had a trip I went on in Europe, but I didn't have the picture that I wanted to post at the right time, and it's all about posting and staying relevant. So I used another picture, and I was just like, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, you're like, I'm so fake right now.
No, so
but you know what? It's good. You recognized it.
Yeah,
you moved on
for sure.
from it, and you're not going to do it again.
No.
And that's what you need to do when you're figuring out your business plan.
Well, that's why stories is so popular on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat.
So I'm amazing at stories
because it's raw stuff, right?
Yeah,
love stories.
Yeah. Love stories.
I deleted my Snapchat. I'm not 100% into it. I said if I'm going to do these stories,
Snapchat is dead.
Snapchat doesn't earn money.
Snapchat's not. I get so many people that hit me up on Snapchat asking me questions and this and that. And after the latest update, so many people dropped off Snapchat because they're like, oh, I don't like how this whole setup is.
Yeah.
So there's less people posting on Snapchat. So you actually get more attention and more views because
from
there's
the people
less...
who are on it looking for stuff. Yeah.
Yep. I have a hunch it's going to be absorbed by Facebook or Instagram. I have just a slight hunch. They haven't turned over a profit. And just like Vine, I missed Vine so much. All of my favorite videos. That is such a millennial thing. When we have grandkids, we're gonna be like, I remember my
back
favorite
in my day,
Viner.
we had Vine.
But I ultimately think that you just have to find your niche, and especially with social media, you can't get overwhelmed. I mean, some days I kick myself when I didn't post something, but it also goes back to be genuine and and have meaning when you post.
Post if you feel like posting. Yeah.
No.
That's great advice. So, Felicia, Marcos, thanks for being on the podcast. Why don't you go ahead, let people know the best way to contact you if they want to do business. Felicia?
All right. So my name is Felicia Mattis. I am a realtor with Abio Properties in Oakland. I'm an East Bay native and a millennial. You can reach me at my email address, which is my first name, Felicia, at abioproperties.com, and it's spelled just like by Felicia. And my phone number is 510-375-2344.
Sweet. And my full name's Marco Vaticano, like the Vatican in Rome, with an O at the end. Yes, it's Italian.
Woo!
I work with Paragon Real Estate Group out in Danville, and I work East Bay area, mostly Contra Costa County. You can reach me at 925-948-5179, and go to my website. Check it out. There's some good stuff. It's marcovaticano.com.
Awesome.
Boom.
So we'll make sure to tag your websites, all your information on Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff.
Much,
so thanks again for being on the podcast.
Been so great.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
And thank you for the champagne,
You're welcome.
too.
Let's finish this bottle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.